Hello, and welcome to Floating City Game Part 3. It is the third in the series of this development log. And today we're actually going to be covering the base rules, the core of the core rule set of the game. It's pretty much done. Obviously, there's going to be needing some changes after some play tests and after I figure out what types of cards and constructions and things like that I would like to put in. But for now, this is the finished rules for, again, the play tests. So hopefully you guys enjoy learning how to play this game and maybe can even help suggest some ideas, including the name of the game, which is still very temporary. So first and foremost, before we get in, I'd like to introduce one more concept to the game that I really think is interesting. I have these 5 different resources here at the bottom: gold, energy, workers, metal, and coal. Now, you'll probably be familiar with workers if you've watched the previous videos. Workers are essentially limited in supply. People will be trying to fight over them, but you will essentially be sharing them. Like when you spend some, other people are going to be able to take some. So that's what it means by limited supply there. It's renewable because they aren't gone when you use them, and you'll gain more on landfall. So in between each act, essentially, there will be more in the pool that you can play with. Now, I think that's pretty interesting. So I decided to put in more interesting resources. So gold is your standard. You have unlimited supply. You can grab as much as you want. Energy is similar to gold in that sense, but at the end of each act, at every landfall opportunity, you're actually going to deplete them. Originally, it was at the end of each turn, but you don't actually. Your turns are fairly short. You wouldn't be able to make use of it. So it depletes after each landfall, which I think is interesting. It sort of puts a time limit on when you can use it, so you want to get it all out before you're able to, before you go through each act, is the idea behind that. Metal is similar to workers in the sense that it's limited and it's renewable. So there's only going to be a few in circulation. You're going to be fighting over it. But you won't be gaining more on landfall. Essentially, what's there is there, and you guys are just going to be fighting for it. If there's not enough and you can't get more of it, well, that sucks. So there's even strategies where you might try and sandbag and hold on to all the metal. But if you do so, you're also limiting your opportunities because you're not able to actually complete certain projects, or you're unable to purchase weapons because you're deciding to sandbag instead. So that's sort of the idea behind those. And then coal, which I think is the most interesting one, other than maybe the workers here. Coal is limited in supply. Again, you guys are going to be fighting over it, but it's removed from the game on use. Similar to coal in real life. When you burn it, it's burnt. It's gone. So I think that's going to be really interesting, where throughout the game, you're going to start off with a bunch of coal, but over time, that slowly depletes, and you're going to be able to use less and less of it. So you're going to have to shift strategies and move away from using coal into more like wind farms or solar energy. I think wind farms is probably what I'm going to stick with, just given that it's a floating city. I mean, like, it makes perfect sense. So does solar panels, really, but I feel like wind power is like just the most intuitive one out of those. But I think coal is going to be really interesting. So I like these ideas here. So with that said, let's actually get into the meat of this video, which is the actual rule book. So here we go. Starting off with the components, as you do. And also, this isn't like the final rule book. I already covered that, but the order will change. It'll look better, things like that. But yeah, here we go. We have our components. We have 180 cards. The reason why it's specifically that amount is because I've made a lot of card games, and the way they have it is you print them in sort of sets of 18 almost. It's more like 36, but yeah, anyways, the way you print it, it's like that. So I decided to do the full 180. there's options to do 198, but I figured 180 was a little bit of a safer bet. The halfway ones is sort of weird with their UI, the people I use, the printers. So for now, it's just 180, which I think is plenty, more than enough actually. So these are the different cards we'll be dealing with. There's of course the community projects. There are several weapons, artifacts, which are going to give you special passive bonus effects. There's all of the different goals. These are the different things you'll be taking and holding onto for the game, and whoever has the most at the end wins. You have the events with special one-time effects, cohorts, which you'll be able to hire them and make them do your bidding. There are 8 tradable powers, which you may remember we talked about a long time ago, with these tradable powers as the inspiration from Suvardis. And essentially you'll be incentivized to trade them because you won't be able to use them yourself, but you'll be able to have special abilities if you trade for one. So they're pretty coveted resources. And then, of course, you have your landfalls and conclusions, sort of reminders throughout the deck in order to, remind you to do these things. And also just to signify when you do these things, because it would probably be hard to know exactly when you get through a third of the deck, especially with the deck being so varied. And of course, here I have just a bunch of placeholder tokens and stuff. I'm not too familiar with each of the counts for each of these in terms of printing them out on the cardboard pieces. So for now, these are all placeholder. The ones that aren't necessarily placeholder that I know for a fact are going to be this way is these workers. There's going to be 30 gray workers. These are the communal workers. There's going to be 40 of the colored ones, not in the slavery sense, sorry, but in the red, green, yellow, blue type thing. So these are just your loyal workers that will be to your color when you choose which color you want to be. 40 control tokens, again, it just corresponds with this. So it does have to kind of be that way, at least for the way I designed it, at least right now. 15 cohort tokens, because each token is going to correlate to one of the cohorts. And then, 5 construction tokens, and of course the board, which is going to be a hex grid, 7 tiles wide. Now again, the victory condition is just you have the most goals completed at the end. And now the goals and sub-goals, there's going to be 1 goal of each of these points and 1 sub-goal of each of these points. Throughout the game, you'll be collecting sub-goals, and at the very end, you'll be able to collect all of the goals. And whoever has the most in any of these subjects are going to, get a point, garner something for their effort. And I figured, since coal is a burnable resource that just disappears forever, I wanted coal to be really valuable towards the end. So that's why potential energy here is twice your coal and once your energy, because I want it to be your coal being super valuable. But I didn't really want people to just hold onto the coal and not use it at all, because in order to save it for the end, because I don't think that's as fun. So your energy is in as well. Previously, it was just if you have the most coal, but I realized that would be a little bit unfun just to hold on to a resource just for the benefit of like 1 point at the end, when you could be doing so much more interesting things. So your energy is also really important here, and you're going to probably be able to get energy as easily as coal. So you're going to be more willing early on to fork over some coal, just because it helps you go forward and get some more of that energy quicker, if that makes sense. Anyways, but yeah, these are all the different goals that you'll be working towards. Hopefully they're all quite competitive. Here we have our setup. I know it's very chunky with 16 steps if you include the advanced setup, but essentially what you're doing here is you're just laying out all of the pieces. You just lay out the board, you put your pieces to the side, you get everything in place. The main thing you're doing that's complicated in this is you're setting up the deck. The deck will be of 60 cards, and you'll shuffle it together. You'll split into 3 parts. Each part, at the end of it, you'll put a landfall or a conclusion card. And in addition to that, you're also shuffling into each part 3 random events, help spice the game up a bit, and also 3 cohorts. So these cohorts, when you shuffle them in, on their backside will be a community project that allows you to elect them or appoint them or hire them as an official person that works for you. So those are the main things in the deck that's sort of set up pretty simply. And you're also going to, and one more thing, you're going to gain or start off with 3 communal workers and 1 loyal worker. So that is plenty of weight to get started with, plenty of stuff to let you move forward a bit. The only thing about that I'm a little bit wary of is if you go last, you have more options and more opportunities than the person who goes first. So going first in this game might be a slight disadvantage to start with, which could be a really bad thing, but we'll just have to see through playtesting. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it could be bad. It could be something that might be potentially, possibly, slightly bad in the future, but we shall see. We shall see. Advanced setup here, all this is adding asymmetry to start with. So this is each person starts with a cohort, with an artifact, and also the tradable powers is where they come in. You start off with 2 of them that you'll be able to use. Now, for the rest of this rulebook, and also I guess even here, and the terminology is using gaining and grounding. But essentially what gaining and grounding is when you gain something, you gain it from the communal reserve, which that makes sense. I think when you gain something, like, that's pretty intuitive from most games, at least. If you've played any game before, then you're pretty used to what gaining means. Grounding, on the other hand, is sort of like banishing. When you banish a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or in Magic or in any other game, it's generally gone. It's removed from the game. That's essentially what grounding is here. It's just that there are some cards that might interact with grounded material. So whenever you burn coal, for example, that becomes grounded. There's going to be like 10 or so communal workers that start off grounded, but then will be trickled in throughout the game. Again, each landfall, you're getting 5 new communal workers from the ground. They board your air city, your floating city. So that's essentially what that is. Grounding is just not something you touch most of the time. Now, what you're going to be doing turn to turn is pretty simple. You're going to do 2 of the following actions. You're going to either do a recruitment action, a work action, or a cohort action. And again, you do it twice per turn. Now, the reason why you're not doing 1 of each is because A, that's a lot of stuff you're doing, and B, if you don't have a cohort, you're at a significant disadvantage, which this does get glossed over when everyone starts off with a cohort. But for simplicity, I didn't want people to start off, like when they start playing the game, I don't want them to focus on what's this do, what's that do. I mean, that's fine, but most people aren't really heavily analytical. When there's a mountain of information, it's really hard to actually get started. So adding in the cohorts and tradable powers and artifacts immediately is a little bit too much information overload, especially because of how much stuff you're actually doing with these different actions. So essentially, I just wanted to separate this so it's for the advanced players. So if you're not playing the advanced version, then you're still at even rounds, even if someone else manages to get a cohort first, because they don't get the extra action. Instead, they have to sacrifice something else in order to do that cohort action. So, and yeah, it's a weird thing, but essentially the action economy doesn't get changed too much. You have more options available, but you aren't at a significant, overwhelming advantage compared to your opponents if you manage to get a cohort first. And again, even if it was an issue, for advanced setup, it does sort of smooth it over, but hopefully it minimizes that whoever gets it first pretty much wins the game type thing, right? So moving on, here are the different actions. Now, and the thing that I've liked about this game is actually like the idea of 9. There's 9 goals, there's 9 of this, 9 of that. So there are also 9 actions. Now, that's not really on purpose. I kind of slimmed it down to as much as I could. Unfortunately, it is ballooned out to 9 actions, which is a lot to know and keep track of. But they should all be simple enough. Plus, again, if you're starting out with the game, you're completely ignoring these because you don't have any cohorts to start with. So really, it's just these 6, and these are the more complicated ones anyways. So, I mean, hopefully it's an easy experience to get into. That's my real goal with this first few play tests. Maybe I'll make it more complicated later, but I think it's plenty complicated already. Just getting people in is the main important part here. So recruitment actions, there are 3 different ones. There's 3 of each. And okay, side note, originally it would be like you do 3 actions or 2 actions or something per turn. The reason why I separated it into 3 categories is so that you can't do it. It's weird to say, but it'd be too strong to do 2 of the same type of thing. That's why I grouped them the way that they're grouped. Like, I'm sure you're sacrificing like something else. I don't know how to describe it, but essentially, if you were to do 2 recruitment actions, that could boost you so much further than doing 1 of each that I had to limit it in some way. Plus, it helps make decisions more interesting instead of, again, information overload, where you have to choose 2 of 9. Instead, it's 1 of 3, and then two of 1 of 3. But it's so much less to consider when it's like essentially you're just picking the best out of 3 in this case. And yeah, the decision paralysis should be lowered because of that as well. So it's more balanced this way, and it should be an easier hurdle to do on your turns, just to, you figure it out more easily. I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, that's essentially the reasoning behind it. Now, the recruitment actions here, there are the 3 that we've already seen before. If you've seen the other videos, there's the gaining community workers. So you gain 3, someone else gains 2, someone else gains 1. Pretty simple. Again, ideally, this helps make people suffer. Like, you force people into specific alliances, or, oh, I see how it is, you didn't give me any, how dare you, that type of thing. You may make any amount of your idle workers into soldiers. Essentially, this removes your capability of contributing to community projects, which is a huge loss, especially because these are loyal workers who always come back after they're done with a project. So these are like vital resources. You're losing them in order to gain soldiers, which are huge because you're pretty much winning every combat if you have more soldiers than your opponent, because they're just a consistent resource. You don't even have to contribute that many weapons to it, but of course that comes at a huge cost. So if you're able to do that, then great. And the reason why your opponents would be able to transform one into a soldier as well is, again, I want this idea of every action benefits everyone, but also if one person becomes mega strong, I want there to be some check to that balance. Checks and balances to that. Check to that balance, huh? Okay. Now, the third recruitment action is you're essentially just making 2 of your idle workers into loyal workers, which again, huge, but these are vital resources. So the reason why it's important for this check and balance, once again, that each other player gets to make one of their own workers into loyal workers. It's very important that this is the case because otherwise you would be able to steamroll them so fast. So each other player is getting half the benefit that you're getting. So do you really want to do this? If someone has no communal workers to turn into loyal workers, this is like the perfect opportunity to actually get some people into your ranks, essentially. So it's really about timing with this third one, and it's also, like, again, really vital that you get loyal workers, because it also makes the pool of communal workers smaller, so it makes your opponents suffer more. That's the important part, making your opponents suffer. But also it benefits you a lot, but also it benefits them a lot because they just get a free loyal worker if they have a communal worker. So there's a lot of politicking you can do with this. It's a really interesting action, both of these ones down here. Actually, all of the recruitment actions I find are fascinating. Now, there are work actions here. Starting a community project, this hasn't changed at all. Essentially, you just place one open, and people can contribute to it. Once it's done being contributed to, it's done. That's it. You may then, as a different work action, contribute your workers and resources to any of the projects that are available. Pretty simple. And you may lastly ground any amount of community projects in your hand and then draw back up the same amount. Essentially, if you don't like the cards in your hand, you can redraw. Now, the issue I find with this is that it might be really bad for the game. I'm still debating. Originally, it was you would draw one, or you would discard one and then you would draw two. In this case, it's discard any amount and then draw any amount. The reason why it's an issue is because you have 5 cards in your hand, and you'll pretty much always have 5 cards in your hand. I don't think it'll ever really change. The reason, but the reason why it's always 5 cards in your hand is because I only allow 5 community projects to be open on the field at once, and I think it's a really nice reminder, like, oh yeah, I have 5 cards in hand, there's 5 on the field, I can't do anything, right? So the reason why it's 5 and 5 is just so that it's easy to make that correlation. Now, that's sort of why I wanted to make it, instead you discard 1 and draw 2, you can discard any amount and then draw back up. The issue, again, is that makes the game go way too fast, at least if I'm playing it in my head right. If people just discard their entire hand and then draw 5 new cards, that's like, what is that? That's 1/12 of the deck just gone. That's crazy. If people do that, again, you have 2 actions per turn. If each person just does that as their action, that's a third of the game just gone, right? So I'm a little bit worried about that one. Maybe I'll make it so you discard 2, draw 2, or something like that. Or even better, you draw 2 and then discard 2, so it makes it worthwhile. But for now, we'll see how it goes. It might not be as big of an issue as I think, but I think I might end up changing that to 2 and 2, now that I mention it. Yeah, we'll see though. And lastly, of course, we have our cohort actions. These also haven't changed. You just move one of your cohorts a specific amount of spaces. If it lands on someone else, you do a battle. You gain control over the space your cohort's in, and if your cohort has an activatable ability, you may use it. Pretty simple. So now we have combat. Combat, again, is like, I wanted to keep this simple. It's kind of simple. Essentially, each cohort will have a strength modifier. So let's say they'll have a strength of 1, right? Actually, I have my pen right here. Let's say your cohort is very muscular. They have a strength of 1. Let's say you play a card, a weapons card, and that weapons card has a value of 2. And then you have 3 little soldier guys. 3. So now when you fight with this cohort, you play this card, and you, of course, always have your 3 soldiers. That means you have a total combat value of 6. So if this guy were to land on someone else, a different cohort with different values, so let's say 2, and let's say your opponent plays a 0 combat card, and they only have 3 soldiers, same as you. Well, guess what? They'll have a combat of 5. That means they lose the combat. Pretty simple. Now, the reason why there's these combat cards is so that you don't necessarily know you'll always win a fight. like for example here, 1 and 3 is 4, and 2 and 3 is 5, of course. I think most of us know how to add. Now, the reason why these combat cards are a thing is because they're secret until both players reveal their one combat card. And that can dramatically swing things, as you can see here. So there's no really surefire way to know your win. And when you buy a weapons card, you're buying a random one. So you don't necessarily know what people have. You just know if they have more weapons, there's a higher chance they have better weapons. But you don't even know if they're going to use their best weapon, because once you use your weapon, you shuffle it back into the weapons deck. So there's a lot of give and take there. Like, should I push it? Should I be safe? I think plenty of interesting decisions in combat, despite it being relatively simple, I would say. Control tokens. Again, if you have control on something, you control it. Now, in order to limit how fast you expand, I've decided to put a limit on how many control tokens you can have on the board at once. And also just because I don't want to make each player have 37 control tokens. That's how many spaces will be on the grid, by the way, 37. If people could expand endlessly and they just drown out all the other players, I would have to have each color have 37 tokens, which is absurd. So from a logistics standpoint, printing out 37 control tokens per player is not the option. So, and plus, for balance reasons as well, it'd be too powerful if someone could steamroll other people that easily. So you're only allowed to have control tokens on the board, controlling these different constructions based off of how many loyal workers you have and how many soldiers you have. So essentially, I would call these loyals, because pretty much if there's a loyal worker, they're loyal to you pretty much forever. They become a soldier, they're still loyal to you. So you can only have control equal to the amount of loyal workers you have. And you can imagine this as your gang, your guys just hanging out, like managing the different stalls or managing the mines and stuff like that. I think that's a pretty balanced way to do it. Of course, the only issue could be that if someone gets ahead, they get ahead strong. But we'll see how that works out. And also, again, checks and balances. When someone gains 2 workers, that means they could gain 2 control tokens, but other players will also gain a loyal worker, meaning that they gain another control token. So again, there's a lot of balance in that. Events, as I said before, once drawn, special effect, and you'll replenish your hand back up to 5. So once you use an event, you draw a card back, and that's pretty much it. Landfall, this hasn't changed since last time as well. Essentially, you will there will be 3 sub goals right now, and then you will award those out. Then you'll gain new 3 sub goals for your next landfall and for the end of the game. And then each player will get 2 random artifacts, and they'll keep one of them. And again, these are like permanent bonuses. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, you gain more communal workers to reserve, and all energy goes away. That's pretty much it. And then the conclusion card, similar to the landfall, just all sub goals and goals are awarded to players, and whoever has the most wins the game. Trading is something that I really want to emphasize in this game. Players can trade anytime with pretty much anything. It can be favors, it can be cohorts, it can be even workers, loyal workers. If you were to give someone a loyal worker, then once it's done being used by them, it'll come back to you, because that's how the rules of the game works, and I just decided to clarify it there. And by this, I mean, like, again, the way that I have it work right now, which I think like makes it super interesting. So I'm just going to leave it as is. But let's say there's a loyal green worker. Loyal green, yes, LG. And this is the green zone for a construction card. This is the red, yellow, blue. And again, when you're contributing to a community project, you put it in one of these quadrants based off of which color you are. And all things that you put into that quadrant are all things you put into that quadrant are considered your contribution to it. Now, if this loyal green gets contributed into the red zone, it's still a red contribution, but at the end of this community project, once it's finished and all the things have been contributed to it, now this loyal worker will always return back to the green player, but it's still counted as a red contribution. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much that. Workers, again, you have loyal workers and communal workers. Loyal workers come back to you once the project's done. Communal workers go to the community once they're done. And of course, you have your soldiers. Right here, I have this 4 clarities section. And essentially what this 4 clarity means is your idle workers, your loyal idle workers will be like this because they're idle and they're chilling. Then your soldiers are always standing up, ready, on guard. Now, the reason why I don't want to put out player boards is because they're very expensive. Now, I've taken a look at the boards that I can make for the game, and there's actually a huge open section behind the logistics is weird, but essentially the smallest hexagon size they have is 25 by 25 millimeters, and I assume 25 means across lengthwise. Hopefully that is what it is. I don't know how else they would have done it, but hopefully that's what it is, because if that's the case, then I will create a hex grid of, again, 7 wide, and it will be spanning a pretty chunky amount. That is 25 millimeters spanned across 7 times over, is wide enough to, at first, I don't know why I brought in millimeters, but the board size that I would go for is a 9-inch by 9-inch minimum, because I think the size that this would take up is about 8 inches or 8.5 inches or something like that. But the minimum thing with that is that the only option with that is that it's not a square. Well, it is a square, but it's an bifold square, meaning that it would fold out like this, meaning that this is where the hex grid would be. And then there's this extra section here that I don't have any real use for, other than potentially where your soldiers would go, or potentially where the reserves would go. So essentially what I'm planning on having here would be a community project like load up. This is where you would put your community projects. And this is also where you put your soldiers as well. So this is where the red soldiers are, blue soldiers, so on. This is where you put your soldiers. It's clear to everyone where your soldiers are and how many of each. But for playtesting, we don't have a fancy board. Instead, we'll just be using pen and paper. So for the time being, this is what it will be like. In fact, I probably won't even use workers that can stand up or sit down. They'll probably just be pieces of paper, and it'll just say W on it. Worker. Yep, playtesting. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the entirety of the rules. And all that's left here are all these different leaf nodes. These community projects, haven't come up with any yet. Starting community projects, constructions, I came up with 10 or so of them, but I deleted them all because I didn't like how few they were. I think the game would feel too samey over time. Because, I don't know, it's sort of a weird thing, but there were only 10 different constructions, and they all kind of worked similarly. I didn't really like it. They did have some interesting adjacency bonus things, though. Like, most of the constructions were all gained bonuses if they were adjacent to mines. So mines were a really special resource where you want as many mines as possible. You want to connect the mines because they get adjacency bonuses from adjacent mines, but you also want to put in factories there because factories also get adjacent bonuses from them, or stores or restaurants and things like that. Everything gets bonuses from mines. So they're your like key resource in terms of constructions and how you like screw people over is by removing their control over their minds. And anyways, I got rid of them just because I want there to be a bit more variety. But yeah, as of right now, I don't have any of these unique leaf nodes, but I do have, again, all of the base rules. And next time I check up, I will be done with the leaf nodes, and I will start playtesting, I guess. The only thing is that I don't think I will playtest on camera. I could, but I don't know. I don't think it'd be interesting to hear someone rambling on by themselves, playing against themselves. Maybe I'll invite some friends one day and we can play test it together, perhaps. But I don't know. Maybe. But the next time you'll hear from me will probably be a long time. That'll be once all of the play tests are over, I suppose, and once all of the cards are finalized. And then I guess that would be right before the art. And then maybe I'll try streaming the art process, maybe, as I draw the cards. I don't know. I'll see how that works out, I guess. Anyways, this is probably going to be the final video for a while. So thanks for watching. See you later.